Alright, so our next example is ground. We're gonna try and create some different materials for the ground. So let's start with some basic dirt. Okay, I found a photo somewhere on the internet. I'm just gonna check out if it's styling alright. Actually, it looks like it's a pretty decent texture already. So I'm just gonna copy everything and increase the resolution 2 times in each direction. Okay. Just merge these together. And I'm gonna use my stamp tool, clone stamp tool, to get rid of the most obviously visible tiling elements. Okay, so that's a bit better. And let's save this texture as ground dirt. And the next step is generating a displacement map. And for this step, I'm going to use a pretty nice little software called CrazyBomb. It's very easy to use. You can go to crazybomb.com and download a free demo or buy a license. Okay, let's launch it. Okay, and this is how it looks when launched. It's actually a bit too big for my screen at the moment. Okay, I'm just gonna hide my taskbar. Okay, and launch it again. Right, and once you click this button here, you can open a photo from a file. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to go to our texture, select our dirt map, and now we have to wait for a little while. Okay, and now the first step it asks you to do is select which shape looks more correct. One is inverted and one is correct. So in this example, I think this one looks good. We have these all little bumps coming up instead of in, so this is the one I'm going to choose. Okay. And the CrazyBomb automatically generates a preview on a sphere. You can change that to a column, a roller, or a box, whichever you prefer, or load your custom mesh. I'm gonna stick with the ball. And we're gonna go to our displacement and adjust it a little bit. Okay, maybe let's make it a bit more even. Enhance the detail a bit. And the preview is updated automatically all the time. Okay, so I think this looks good. We can also generate an occlusion map. Specular map, it has all sorts of different parameters you can use, like slope influence, texture influence. Just play around with them to see what they do. Okay, so I'm going to increase the texture influence and the slope. Okay, I think this will work fine as a specular map or reflection. Right, and finally the diffuse map. It has a great option of remove shading. It really helps to get rid of the shadows. You can see all sorts of shadows right now, and once you drag it to the right, most of them are gone, and it's much more usable as a diffuse map. You can try to remove highlights as well. And I don't recommend using these 3D crevices and 3D highlights. You can try color correction, but it's usually not a good idea, and you can do much better in Photoshop. Okay, and once you are satisfied, just click the Save button, and I'm going to save all textures in my texture folder. It's going to take a little while to save them. I'm going to go back to Max and create a new material for the ground. Okay, starting with the diffuse color. Okay, so it's still generating the textures. Takes a while. Just wait for it to finish. Okay, so here's the diffuse. Let's open it up. Turn on Show in Viewport and assign to our ground plane. The scale looks good. Now let's set up the reflect map. I'm gonna use the one generated from Crazy Bump. It's called Specular. Open it. And blur the reflections down to 0.4. Okay, I'm gonna turn on Fresnel and set it at 4. Maybe that's a bit too strong. Maybe let's try 3. Okay, good. And I'm also gonna try my reflect map in the reflect glossiness slot. And here I'm gonna reduce it to 50, just to blend it with this 0.4 value. Okay, so that's the base. Let's render and see how it looks. Okay, so one thing you might want to do for textures that are mostly horizontal to your viewing direction, or parallel to your viewing direction, you might want to reduce the blur just to bring out the detail. Otherwise it's all blurry and hard to tell what's going on there. So reduce the blur for those textures and it should give you sharper results. And you can see it's sharper already. Okay, and finally we are ready to add a displacement map in the display slot. Choose bitmap, and by default Crazy Bump generates TIFF files for the displacement. So make sure you set that to all files or to TIFF and choose your displacement map. Okay, and it looks like if it gives you an error message like this, that it's an invalid file type, you can fix that easily by selecting your texture, renaming it from TIFF to just TIF. And that should open it fine. Okay, perfect. And let's start the the displacement at 3. I'm going to increase my render size. And wait for just a little while until it calculates the displacement map. It looks pretty nice. Rough ground surface, dirt. Looks pretty realistic from here. Okay, for a dirt ground, you might want to adjust your diffuse texture a little bit. For example, I'm gonna make it darker and a little bit less saturated. and resave it. And back to our scene. Let's render a little patch over here. Okay, that's a bit darker. Let's see how it looks. Looks good, I think. So as you can see, Crazy Bump is a great way to very quickly generate some displacement maps from regular photos. Especially useful for stuff like ground, rocks. And let's do another one. Let's do another example. Okay, let's leave this to render. I'm just gonna reduce the resolution. And let's do another example. I'm gonna create a gravel ground. Okay, let's check first if this is a tileable texture by using the offset filter. And it looks like it. So I'm just gonna copy everything and increase the size a bit. And just drag those to corners. Okay, and let's get rid of these tiling elements over here, here. What else? Maybe over here. I think that's good. And let's save it as gravel. Okay. Back to max, you can see our nice dirt is being rendered. Might be just a tiny bit too reflective, but that's an easy fix. I forgot to tell you one more thing. If you have an area like this with a very large ground, it's extending up to the horizon, you might want to split it into two parts, one with the displacement and one without. I have a regular Vray plane slightly below my ground model, and what I would do usually in a project is I would duplicate my material. Okay, I'm just going to show you. I would duplicate my material, rename it, and move the displacement map to the bump map. And I would assign that to the rest of my ground. And this way it's going to be much faster rendering than if I would use a displacement on it. And it looks pretty good up there in the distance, and renders much faster than with displacement. Okay, so let's set up our gravel material. I'm going to switch to Crazy Bump. I'll load another texture here. It's hard to see the bottom, but it's over here on the left lower corner. And open the second photo, or the gravel, and wait for it to appear. Okay, since the texture is pretty large, it takes a while to load. And now choose the correct one. This time the left one is correct. You can see these little gravel stones bumping up instead of down over here on the right, so choose this one. preview. I'm just gonna relaunch the crazy bump. It's hard to work in this low resolution sometimes, but if I want to keep the video size low and download fast, I have to record in a lower resolution than I usually work in. And here we go again. Just pick the correct shape. And reduce my normal map intensity. For the preview. And the displacement as well. Okay, it looks something like this. Let's enhance the details, just to make it sharper. Looks pretty good, I think. Alright. Okay, and the specular map. Let's look at that. I think something like this will work. And finally the diffuse. Let's remove the shading. And this texture is pretty good as it is. Okay. And let's save all textures. And let's save it as gravel. So once again, it's going to take some time to save. Let's switch back to 3D Max and set up a new Vray material. Okay, let's start with the diffuse. I think we could use even the original texture we had. Just gonna reduce the blur and turn on preview. And that might be a little bit too large. Let's increase the tiling to 2x2. Okay, next the reflect map. Still saving pretty slow. Right, open up the specular map. And increase the tiling to match the diffuse texture. And once again, I'm going to reduce reflection glossiness to a pretty low value like 0.5. Okay, and the final map we're going to assign is the displace map. And that's going to be a TIFF file. Again, we have to rename it for it to work correctly. And load it in. set the tiling to 2x2. And let's try a quick test render. Alright, forgot to change my displacement amount. I'm gonna stick with 3 for now. Looks like a crazy futuristic city. Alright, that's better. And you have this little gravel all over the place. And it looks pretty realistic and casts shadows correctly since it's displaced and not just a simple bump. Okay, maybe the scene is not alright for this sort of ground cover. Trees usually don't grow out of this gravel, but I just wanted to show you how you can create the material, so that's fine. Okay, so that's the gravel material. Pretty simple to create. And next up is gonna be snow. I have a texture right here. Or maybe let's increase the contrast a little bit. And save it as snow. Alright, now let's go to Crazy Bump and load our photo of snow. I think this one looks more accurate. Alright, so right now the displacement is a bit too strong. Let's enhance detail first, then make the depth a bit lower. So like this. And I'm actually not going to use any of the other maps, I'm just going to use the displacement. You can move the light around on this preview ball by using the right click. It helps you judge the shape better sometimes. Okay, let's close that. And move to max. Let's create the snow material. Actually, for snow, I want to use the Vray car paint material. It might seem like a weird choice, but it actually works out pretty good since the snow has these little shiny flakes, just like the car paint material. Okay, first I'm going to reduce the base glossiness to 0.5 and change the base color to a fall of map. So let's set the colors to something almost white and something a bit darker and a slightly bluish, like this. Okay, I think that's a good base color. Now let's move on to the flakes. First, let's render it. Okay, the flakes look much too large at the moment. Oh, well, that's not a big problem. We can fix that by... Okay, first, it's actually a good thing that they are so large. We can adjust the density a bit better. I want it pretty dense. And I want the flakes a bit larger. Okay, maybe that's too large. Okay, like this. Okay, good. Now let's make the flakes white. Almost pure white. It's nice. Now you can try some different flake orientation for a shinier effect. Okay, 0.6 maybe. Okay, looks good. Nice and shiny. And finally we need to reduce the flake scale. And I think the effect looks pretty nice and pretty much like snow. Okay, let's assign a bump map to this material. For that, I'm going to use the displacement map we generated from Crazy Bump. Okay, just turn on the preview to see how it looks. I think the tiling is fine. Maybe let's reduce the bump amount to 20 or so. Right, just can't figure out what that is over here. Okay, so for this car paint material, what we have to do is remove the reflections from the coat. Actually, we don't need the coat color at all. So just drop that down to 0, and it should get rid of those weird reflections we have here. Okay, or not. Just turn off the coat trace reflections and that's going to be fine. Yeah, and those weird reflections are gone. And we just have the basic snow material. Okay, it looks pretty nice. I think we can bump up the strength of our bump map. Maybe let's try it at 80 for now. And for regular snow, this would be fine. But if you want to make it a bit more interesting, we can use some displacement for it. So the first step I would do for displacement, I would probably add another UV map to my object and make sure it fits the whole thing. Okay, and set the map channel to number 2. Right. And now let's create some sort of tracks on our snow. Like in snow, or footprints or something like that. I'm just gonna look for footprints. Okay, maybe like this one. Let's copy it. And create a new file. And paste our prints. Okay, I'm just gonna do this randomly. For an actual project, I would probably render out my UV template and place the prints in strategic places where they usually appear, like on the street or so. And for this, I'm just going to show you the basic technique. Okay, let's merge these all together and bump up the contrast. Okay. So next step is going to be filling another layer with medium gray color. Let's set that to multiply. Okay. So what you want to do is create these depressions in snow that go inside where the footprints are, and some slightly extruded upwards areas around them. It can be a bit tricky to create. I'm just going to do it like this. I'm just going to use my color range selector tool, select all the black areas, and duplicate them 2 times. Okay. For the first layer, I'm gonna change my lightness to pure white, and add the layer style, stroke, and set it to a white color. Okay, like this. And for the second layer, I'm gonna blur it by using the Gaussian blur filter. Okay. I'm gonna merge this layer with an effect with a regular layer, so I can modify it by using another filter on it. Let's use Gaussian blur again. Alright. And maybe let's mix it with our snow displacement map. Actually, I'm just gonna copy everything and paste it on top of this image here. Okay. First I'm gonna duplicate my background layer, make it much darker. Actually, let's do it a bit differently. Let's merge these together. Duplicate the background layer, move it on top, and reduce the opacity. Okay, and let's add another layer below our footprints and fill it with gray color. Okay, that's gonna be fine. And just merge everything together and bring up the contrast with the curves tool. And I'm gonna save it. Okay, back to Max. Let's make a copy of this. Actually, since we can't use a displacement map for Vray car paint material, we're gonna use it a bit differently. We're gonna create a new bitmap here. Browse our footprints. Turn on show in preview. And I'm going to use this dummy material first to check out the location of the prints. Okay, so like this, and move the map a bit to get the prints inside my rendered area, like this. Okay, assign the original material back, and we're gonna add a Vray displacement modifier. And drag and drop this map in the text map slot. Make sure you set it to instance. Okay, let's leave the amount at 1 for now and render and see how it looks. And 1 is much too weak. Now let's try maybe 4. And you have these footprints in the snow. Some natural looking snow outside with some natural looking snow walls around it. Okay. Looks pretty good. And that's how you create some basic snow material with some footprints. You can probably even bring the amount up. Let's double it and see how that looks. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so there you have it, dirt, gravel, and snow. And you can use these techniques to create many different types of ground cover